Hello viewers, and welcome yet again to another episode of Lunch Guide. I am your host Chef Andy, and today I'm going to be doing a beautiful simple classic. I'm going to be making some breaded fish. We're going to be pairing that with some French fries, and I'm going to also show you how to plate that right at the very end. So before we get that far, we're going to begin by introducing what we'll be working with today. And I'll start from the very front, where I've got some garam masala, some minced ginger, and some paprika powder. I'm also going to be using some white pepper, some cumin powder, some oregano, and some garlic cloves. You're going to also require 2 limes and 1/2 lemon, 1 piece of gherkin, and about 2 tablespoons of ketchup. You're also going to use 2 eggs, about 3 fillets of fish, about 84 to 120 grams each, some lettuce and some tomatoes to garnish, some salt and pepper for seasoning. You also will require some oil for frying, some peeled potatoes which you're going to be chopping up into fries, and last but not least, some flour and some breadcrumbs to coat your fish. So do not touch that dial. We'll be seeing you in a short while, giving you just enough time to grab your pens and papers, and when we do come back, we'll just dive right into it. So see you after a short break. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. If you missed on the introduction, we've just finished introducing the ingredients before us today. We are right about ready to start the process, and it's going to be very, very simple. You're going to begin by seasoning your flour. So I've got about 1/2 cup of all-purpose flour in the bowl. And what we're going to do is we're going to begin by adding our garam masala, our paprika powder, our white pepper, just a small pinch, of course, about 1 teaspoon of cumin powder, and your minced ginger, and last but not least, some garlic, but proceed to chop that very, very quickly on your board. So I'm going to be using about 3 garlic cloves. So very simply, bang those on your board with your knife, back of your knife rather, and proceed to chop this very, very finely. Right, so in goes the garlic. Now, using a spoon, proceed to mix everything through. So this particular technique is very handy, especially when coating. It is an alternative to marinating any particular ingredients you will be putting into your oil. But particularly this is for most of the fastest cooking methods actually use, or rather fastest breading methods are used this way. So you would actually just season your flour. Alternatively, you could also season partly in your flour and in your breadcrumbs. The flavors will come through just the same. So once mixed through, set your flour aside. And proceed to grab your fish, and using your sharp knife, begin to cut your tilapia right through the center, allowing for some nice big sizable chunks. and we're going to be using for that about 150 to 200 grams of fish. So very, very handy as well. Some kitchen towel. This I particularly like to set on the board. Place your tilapia fillets right over the board, or rather right over the parchment paper. Place another one right over the top and begin to press down. And this should actually help you to get rid of any moisture in your fish or any excess water. Be sure to also be very, very vigilant when using fish, or rather deep frying fish. Be sure to also defrost it in good time, or rather use it fresh. That way you will actually avoid the oil from popping. And remember, another thing is be very, very vigilant when frying anything, especially if working with ingredients that may actually be a little moist. It could actually cause a bit of a fire. So be sure to always make sure to drain any particular liquid, especially water, if you're going to be deep frying. So very quickly, begin the process by allowing your oil to heat up on the side. So once patted down, you will be able to actually see quite a difference in your fish. And to that we'll proceed to add into our flour mixture. And proceed to discard. Very, very important to clean your hands before you proceed. This will avoid any chances of contamination. And another thing as well, be sure to turn your board around. And next up, proceed to coat your fish in flour, giving it just a few seconds to sit in the flour. Allow for the flour to coat the fish very evenly. Remember, this will avoid for your fish to have any water or any excess moisture. And remember, the seasoning is in the flour as well, so this will particularly allow for the flour to flavor through to your fish. And you can actually be able to use even chicken for this recipe. You can particularly use most ingredients that you're going to be deep frying with the seasoned flour method. It will save you quite a bit of time, especially if you're strapped for time and you're planning to cook in a very, very short while. So just coating the fish once more. Once complete, proceed to grab a plate. Then proceed to begin by first patting down the fish, making sure to remove any excess flour. You can set your flour aside for this part. Next up, proceed to crack some eggs into a nice big plate or a bowl. And the egg particularly acts as adhesive. It actually allows for you to be able to really get those breadcrumbs to coat onto your fish very, very easily. And to that, proceed to whisk very, very gently, just right until your yolk is completely broken. And now proceed to the last and final process, where we're going to proceed to coat that in some breadcrumbs and add that to the oil. But very, very importantly, remember, we haven't seasoned with any salt whatsoever, and that we're actually going to leave out for later. Salt will actually dehydrate your fish very, very quickly, so avoid adding that in the beginning. You can alternatively incorporate it with a sauce at the end, and it will actually give a beautiful flavor. If you do have time to marinate your fish, rather, you can marinate your fish with some soy sauce, which will give a very, very good saltiness to it, and it will actually avoid your fish from dehydrating. So very simply, begin by taking your first piece, making of course 2 to 3 tosses in the egg mixture. and straight into your breadcrumbs, but be sure to hold it against the side of the plate or right over the top to allow for any excess egg to pour off. And proceed to add that to your breadcrumbs, giving your bowl a nice quick shake. Turn your fish once, do the same once more. And you can now proceed to add your fish into the hot oil. Be sure to always do this in small batches. Remember, your oil will lose the temperature quite fast if you throw everything in at once. You may actually not also be able to cook everything very correctly or in the best time possible, and it will actually make it very hard for you to get that beautiful color. So be very sure, or rather be very certain, that cooking it in smaller batches will actually give a good result. So next up, another piece, right in the breadcrumb once more. Proceed to toss, or you can use your hands for this process. Just make sure to do it very lightly to avoid forming any lumps on the fish. Once done, proceed to lift from the bowl, just like we did with the first. Tap any excess breadcrumbs off the sides and add that to the oil. Now, if you can be able to get the view from the cameras, it will actually start to brown very quickly. Remember, fish will cook much faster than chicken or meat. It will only take maybe anywhere between 4 to 5 minutes if you're using hot oil, or rather if your oil is hot enough and you've actually got a nice very thin piece. But I'm actually going to take you through a process of making sure your fish is cooked right. But before we proceed to that end, I will remind you, very importantly, to have a separate bowl with a bit of some kitchen towel in it. This will actually allow for you to drain any excess oil once it comes from the fryer. So just to check on the fish, as you can be able to see, nice beautiful colors there. We're going to proceed to cook that for another few seconds. And while we do that, I'm going to proceed to coat the rest of our fish. Making sure to toss it right in there. And remember, you can also alternate eggs for buttermilk, and this will actually be used for any particular diners who may actually have an allergic reaction to eggs. Buttercream is a very good alternative. So once coated, proceed to add to the breadcrumbs once more, toss through. Proceed to do the same for the other piece. You can actually set your eggs aside now. So proceed to toss together. Making sure to get a nice even coating right through. And we can now bring our attention back to the pot. Our fish is now nicely colored and ready to come out. So we're just going to move that onto our parchment paper. And we're going to proceed to add the rest of the fish. Always remembering to give it a shake before it goes into your hot oil. And now you're going to give that another 4 to 5 minutes to proceed to cook through. And while we do so, we're going to proceed to chop up our potatoes for the fries. Right, so very quickly reassemble your station and proceed now to grab about 2 medium or large potatoes. Be sure to take them out of the water. And you can actually also use some parchment paper to dry those off very quickly. Wipe any excess water with your kitchen towel and proceed to begin to slice your potatoes. So begin by taking just a small slice off the edge, turn it in once, and proceed to do so, turning consecutively until you come to a stage where all your 4 sides are totally flat, and proceed to do the same for the rest. At this stage, I will also remind you, very, very important, to keep an eye on your pot. Don't ever leave your pot unattended, especially when frying. It could actually overcook very, very easily. Right, so I'm going to proceed to remove those last 2 pieces. And we can now allow a few seconds for our fish to drain. And while we do so, we're going to proceed to finish chopping up our potatoes. So as I said, always begin by trimming just a bit of small wedges from the sides. And you can actually reserve those if you're going to be making anything like mashed potatoes. A very, very good addition, or rather a very good purpose for that will come in. So very simply, once you're done slicing your potatoes, begin by slicing about 1/4 inch thick wedges or slices. And once you're done, proceed to reassemble your potatoes once more and proceed to chop your potatoes very, very thin. That's about 1/4 inch to 1/4 inch in size. And proceed to do the same for the rest. This is actually a very, very particularly simple way to get a nice even cut of your fries. And remember, very important that you actually get a nice even size from the beginning to allow for an even cooking period once it goes into the hot oil. Just to finish that off. And as you can be able to see, you can be able to take anywhere from one of the pieces from the end and the beginning, and you should actually be able to get almost an even size every time. So we're going to quickly allow this to cook for a little while. We're going to put that in the oil just very, very briefly. But before I get to that part, I will take a very small break and clear up my station. When we do come back, we're going to do the first cooking of the fries. I'm going to show you how that is done. And then we're going to allow that to cook for the second time to really get a nice, beautiful crisp to it. We're also going to proceed to assemble everything else, including making a very simple salad to serve. So do not touch that dial. We'll be right back. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. For those of you who are with us before the break, we were doing some very, very beautiful fish, and we're about coming to the end of the last particular dish of the day, which was the fries. So always begin by heating your oil. So I'm using my pot to fry the potatoes, but remember, if you do have a deep fryer, you can also be able to do the same thing. So once your oil is nice and hot, we're going to proceed to throw in our potatoes. But before we get that far, I'm going to be showing you how to make a very, very simple salad. So for that, you're going to require some gherkin, about half a lemon, and of course some lettuce and a few pieces of cherry tomato. Right, so this one is going to be a very particularly simple technique of doing a salad, and for this reason I'm just going to assemble it on the plate so that you can all get an idea of what we're talking about. So I'm going to be using this small plate, and for that I'm going to be using this daring mold. So simply just leave that in the center of your plate and proceed to prepare everything that you'll be using for your salad. So I'm going to slice up about 3 medium-sized cherry tomatoes. And also slice your gherkin right through the middle. And you can actually just move those to the sides of your plate. Next up, proceed by grabbing your lettuce. Of course, arranging the leaves very, very simply right over your hand. And more importantly, proceed to trim off any excess stalks, making sure to only have the inner part of the leaves. This is actually still edible, so please don't discard that. And all you're going to do now is begin by placing your lettuce right in the center of the ring. Turn your tomatoes onto their back and very, very quickly season with some salt. Remember, salt really helps to bring out the sweetness of the tomatoes. So just very lightly salt over the inner side of the tomatoes and proceed to add those right over the top of your lettuce. Simple as that. And we're going to set that aside for now. I will come back to it later and show you the last and final step. Next, we're also going to proceed to add our fish to the plate. Very, very simple technique of plating that as well. In the big dish here, I've got some ketchup. You can also alternatively serve this with some bit of tartar sauce. So that I'm going to place right on the plate. And I'm going to proceed to add my pieces of fish. Right over the top. And very, very handy, always have a lemon to serve with your fish. Remember, lemon wedges really actually bring a very, very beautiful freshness to it. And alternatively, now that we have a bit of lime, I'm also going to show you what to do with these. So begin by slicing both limes in half and set those aside just briefly. Now next up, our oil should actually be nice and hot now, but very important, always check your oil before proceeding to fry everything. So drop one piece. As soon as you can hear that beautiful sizzle of the oil, proceed to add your other potatoes. Of course, always making sure to cook at batch sizable enough to actually cook through. Spread those out with your spoon. And now we're going to proceed to allow those to continue to cook. While we do so, we're going to come back to the salad that we were doing earlier. So very, very simply, proceed to just hold the leaves almost right to the center of the ring and proceed to lift the ring mold very, very gently. And all you're going to do is just allow for the salad to just sit as it is. It actually does look very natural when you do so. And as I said, it's just a small tip for some serving suggestions. You can alternatively just chop everything together, season it or drizzle with some olive oil or some dressing, and it will actually do just as good. But just to finish that off, small touch of some freshly ground peppercorns. And that is actually as good as it is, or as simple as it is, to make a salad that's actually a little more cholesterol free Remember, we haven't added any dressing to this particular salad, so we're actually just going to allow for the flavors to be very, very natural at this particular point. So just to bring your attention back to the fries, proceed to cook those at medium heat. Remember, you are going to be cooking it in 2 batches, which of course calls for using a strainer. So very, very simply, grab a strainer of any choice and proceed to have a plate right underneath that. Remember, this will actually allow for you to take the potatoes out and allow all the excess oil to flow back into your pot. Remember, oil does become quite a little costly, especially if you waste it quite a bit, and it will actually not last the period it should. So be very, very wary to always make sure to leave as much oil as you can in the pot. Firstly, by always lifting what you're frying and allowing it to drain. You can also hold your ingredients right over the oil and hold them towards the sides of your pot, on the sides of your pot rather, and this will allow for the excess oil to drain. And another simple and last technique as well, if you actually, if once doing that, you can also lay your plate or the dish that you're going to be setting them on with a bit of some kitchen towel. This is also very, very good for reducing that much oil. So we're going to check on the potatoes now, and these are just about ready to come out. So very simply proceed to remove your potatoes, of course always giving a shake before taking them out completely. And you can proceed to leave those right in your strainer for your excess oil to drain out really, really gently. And this actually also makes it also very quickly it makes it very much easier and quicker to remove anything from the oil. So if you do have a strainer that's particularly stainless steel, it is very, very good for doing this. But remember, if you are going to be using plastic sieves, remember those might not be able to hold on to hot oil, so please avoid using plastic with hot oil. So just give that a quick shake. And we're going to allow those to sit on the side very, very briefly. Now we are going to proceed to turn up the temperature of the oil. Remember, we are going to be cooking fries, or rather it is advised to cook fries in 2 particular stages. Stage 1 would actually be cooking them anywhere between 140 and 160 degrees to actually allow for the potato to cook through. And then take them out briefly, drain them and let them sit on the side, but do not proceed to plate. Allow your oil to continue to heat up a little higher, so bring the temperature to anywhere between 180 to 190 degrees. Throw your potatoes back in the oil and now proceed to give them the last final process of cooking, and also to really get that beautiful golden color. So we're going to just drop 1 piece of potato in there just to check for the temperature once more. And at this particular stage, you will be able to notice that dropping it in, it should actually be able to come up to the surface very quickly, which would actually give you a hint of how hot your oil is. So just proceed to throw a small piece into your oil, and it automatically just bounces to the top. That gives you a nice green light to proceed to add the rest. And be also very, very careful when doing fries. Always avoid any contact with your kids in the kitchen. If you're going to be making fries as well, be sure to do so in a very, very fashionable manner. Take precaution first, because your life does come first. So potatoes are now nicely, perfectly browned, as you can see. We'll proceed to remove those from the oil. And also, very importantly, always remember to turn down your gas just before taking out your ingredients from the oil. It will actually allow for your oil to begin to cool down a little faster. Right, so potatoes done. Now we're going to proceed to just give that a quick shake. And remember, if you're going to be using a stainless steel sieve like the one I'm using, It will actually save you the expense, or rather the waste, of continually using your kitchen towel. So this is actually one of the best ways to cut down, especially when cooking or frying anything in oil. So once you've given that a shake, proceed to grab a nice big bowl, and to that you're going to add about a teaspoon of oregano and half a teaspoon of your cumin powder. Add also a small pinch of salt, and you can optionally also grind in some black pepper. And now proceed to add in your fries and begin to toss everything together. Of course, always making sure to serve your potatoes or your fries crispy. And once done, proceed to grab your plate of choice, and using your pair of tongs, begin to scoop everything into it. Once done, proceed to just lay that right to the side there, right next to everything else. I'm just going to move that to the center. And very, very simply, just to finish that off, always very handy to use a bit of lime. Proceed to squeeze that right over your salad. And of course as well, right over your fish. And that should actually sink in very, very nicely and bring a bit of a freshness to your fish. This can now be served and consumed immediately. You can also make some alternatives or alterations with the ingredients we used on the salad. But as I said, you're not limited to using the ingredients we're using on the show. This is just for demonstration purpose. There is plenty of recipes out there, so do your research. You will be able to find something worth the while. So thank you once again for tuning in. I will thank those of you who are tuning in on Facebook Live as well. Thank you so much for showing your support. And until the next episode, where we continue to bring some beautiful, hearty dishes for this August holidays, from the studios, it's me, Chef Andy, saying goodbye and see you soon.